So welcome to masterclass number 4 on top tips on how to write a killer journalism CV. My name's Laura, in case you guys didn't know. That's my Twitter account. If anybody wants to connect, my DMs are open for chats and lols, cat pictures, questions, anything that's on your mind. And I wanted to start this webinar by counting down from 10. So how long did that, how many things was I able to say in 10 seconds? 1, 2, 3, maybe not that much, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can count backwards because I worked in TV, 0. That's how long you have to impress someone with your CV. 10 seconds. 10 seconds is the time that it takes for someone who's doing that very first filtering when you have 500 applications that are going to turn into 50 that then someone reads lovingly. That's all you get. Let's try it again. So it's 10 and they scan it and they look at it, maybe turn it around. Maybe someone texts them, oh, my dog got out. Okay, do I put it in the yes or the no pile? That's as long as you've got. And that's why CVs are so incredibly crucial, because that is the first and the biggest hurdle, that first call. Think of it kind of like a Hunger Games moment when someone has to whittle down 500 applications for a scholarship or for an internship into 50 that then an editor is going to read. And your CV plays a hugely important part in making that first jump and in making that first impression and in capitalizing on those 10 seconds. Now, I'm not saying that this is everybody. I'm sure there's people who read CVs lovingly from the start. There's people who are changing their hiring practices as well. So doing work applications without any CVs, where it's more task-based, or blind applications where your name isn't mentioned anywhere so that they can't discriminate unconsciously based on like gender or kind of like culture or racial identity. And so there are definitely people who are changing how this works. However, in the vast majority of processes, that first filter is still up to you to use 10 seconds to get from the no pile to the maybe pile. And that's what today's session is going to be all about. And more importantly as well, to remember that sometimes it's not even a person making those decisions anymore. It's an algorithm. For some of the bigger companies who like outsource parts of their HR, the recruitment processes, or where you have to apply online, what you are fighting is to impress an algorithm, something that scans your documents really quickly and that is going to make that decision not even in 10 seconds, but in a split of a second, right? And I'm going to show you some tips to kind of like increase your probabilities of getting through that. These are my 10 steps or 10 tips to think about to write killer CVs for journalism. Now, if anyone's listening and you're from a different industry, I think this applies wider to the creative industries, anything that has to do with storytelling, whether it's visual or podcasts or a little bit in marketing, NGO communications, anything like that. I think these all fall under the same umbrella of being a storyteller, a visual or multimedia storyteller. This advice might be completely wrong if you want to go into finance or accounting or law or academia, but at least for when it comes to the creative industries, I have seen these 5 design and 5 content things really change how people's success when applying for jobs is. And this is born because I used to teach at a university. Some of my former students are watching, and part of my job at the Center for Journalism at the University of Kent was the employability part. So I would look at people's applications. I would help them write cover letters. I would prep them for job interviews, that kind of stuff. So these are born out of that practice. And also the fact that I recently just applied for my last job myself. I've constantly been a freelancer. I've kind of learned how to adapt to how hiring has changed in the last 10 years since I started working, and done it across a couple of continents. So back home in Mexico, a bit in the US, and here. And these kind of stand true wherever you are. Now, I've rambled on purpose on this slide because I want these 10 things to be etched into the back of your mind. 5 have to do with design, so how you present your application materials. And the other 5 have to do with content, so what's in it, in the substance. I'm going to start with the design ones because I think it's the ones that we rarely talk about. The content ones we'll obviously discuss, and I'll answer all of your questions, but I think there's more that has been written around the content part, both on the internet that you can get from your lecturers or your tutors or your other advisors. I want to focus on how design can help you stand out and how you can make everything that you submit as part of an application to a job completely represent you, your skills, what you like, who you are, and therefore improve the chances of you getting that job that you really want, or getting through that first hurdle at least. Now, I put down here the phrase, make sure it reflects you, because this is an important part that we forget about job recruitment. When I'm looking to hire someone, and I've had to hire people now, which is really strange, I'm not just looking at skills. I'm thinking, do I want to work with this person? Do I want this person in my newsroom? Will they fit in with the rest of the team? And that's where making sure that you tell your story both in the content and in the form of what you use to apply is wildly important, because you're telling people this is who I am, and not only do I have the skills to work in your newsroom, but I'd be a perfect fit for your team. And that's where personality comes into place, right? And not everyone has to be loud type A personality. Like, I know I'm loud, that's kind of my thing, I own it. You can be quiet, you can be really into niche things, you can be into music. It doesn't really matter what you're into. Your skills, your experience, your voice is valuable, and it's important to make sure that shines through in your CVs. Get on with it, Laura, right? So here we go. Tip number 1, design your brand. This is a really, really important step, and it's more about changing how you think about things, less than the tools that you actually use to use it. It's about realizing that everything that you put on a piece of paper or in a PDF or in your email signature can tell the story of who you are. And if you use the skills that you have as a storyteller, and you guys will all have them because you're journalists, if you prove that you have those storytelling skills to tell your own story, it's almost like if you were acing your own audition, right? I don't have to tell you that I'm good at telling stories. I can just show you, which is incredibly valuable for employers. And you should think about your brand in 3 different things. And I talked about this a lot more in my first masterclass, which you guys can watch on YouTube, but I'll go through it again real quick. So your brand, who you are, is made up of 3 parts. The visual component of what you apply with, your CV, which we're going to go through right now. The work that you do that backs up what you say in your CV. So if you say you can do short documentaries, there has to be short documentary work to back that up, even if it's just 2-minute films. And number 3, the topics that you say that you're interested in have to be represented through your online activity in your social network of choice, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, pick your poison, right? And these 3 together become this little branded package of you that you hand over to employers to say, I am way shinier than everything else around me, hire me, right? So just to take a little blast from the past, you have to start your visual identity with a little logo. Now, this doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can just be like a nice font that makes your name stand out. Stay away from Arial, Helvetica, Times New Roman, all the normal cast of characters. And this was the very first logo, the very first ideas of a logo that I made for myself back in like 2008 when I was trying to get into photography. I thought it was really artsy. And I was going to do something like a little camera lens, and I wanted to use girly colors because I wanted to own them. I'm not a girly girl, but I thought, well, I'm going to reclaim pink for the people who aren't girly girl. Anyway, I don't like it anymore, but that's what I was thinking at the time. And your visual identity can change with you as you grow. So my next logo was this, a little bit more grown up, still going for pink. I thought it'd be a cool idea to make the G of my name into like the little eye of a camera. And I made myself some business cards that I'd hand out at every event that I was covering. My career, I started out as a photographer, a photojournalist, which is why it all ties into cameras. Then eventually I thought, you know what, I'm done with pink. I need to be super serious because I'm a grown up. This is around the time when I was maybe like 24, 25, and I went for black. And I was like, of course, serious people use dark colors. Used black for a little while. This isn't even, I didn't get this design. This is just a fancy font that I downloaded off the internet. And eventually the one that I use now is the same version of the black, but with white, because I felt I wanted something a little bit more fresh, a little bit more simple, a little bit more grown up in a different way. But again, completely up to you. And it doesn't matter if your visual identity, if your visual brand grows with you as you change what you like, who you are, what you're into, right? And when you're trying to think about this brand and where it needs to be visually represented, right? Think of their user experience, the person who is reading all of your application materials. And this is a concept borrowed from marketing and from UX design. UX is a fancy way of saying user experience. It comes from like app and design and software design. And it's about thinking, me as a person who's never seen this app before, and I'm going to download it and use it. What is my experience as I'm trying to use it, right? Putting yourself in their shoes. And if we think about it the other way around, when you're applying for a job, think about all the ways that a prospective employer is going to come across your work. What if they Google you? What are they going to find? What are all the documents that you're going to have to submit? Do you have to submit a CV? Do you have to submit a cover letter? Do you have to submit a portfolio or a reference letter, anything like that? And make a list. Make a list of all of the things, all of the places where you think people might come across you, your work, your blog, your Twitter, your Insta, your LinkedIn, everything. And make sure that all of it speaks together in one voice and it speaks with one brand. It's part of a wider concept called transmedia storytelling, which applies also to journalism. And it's about how do you build stories across different platforms, whether it's a screen, a film, a play. Think of it like, Ayo's gonna like this reference, like the Marvel universe, how it's all telling one story, even though it's a collection of tons of films, comic books, video games, but all of it is speaking in one voice, right? Like a brand. That's what you need to think about your visual representation of yourself online. Now, if you're thinking, oh my God, Laura, this sounds so complicated, it's really not that complicated. It's just a bit of an upfront cost. You're gonna have to spend some time thinking about who you are, what you want the look and feel of your brand to be, spend some time customizing everything. So there's like a little peak in effort, and then you just maintain, right? So it's almost like a roller coaster. There's an upfront cost and then it comes down. So for example, I think I made a little list of me. So for me, my brand, and these are all the current things that I use to apply for my current job at First Draft, is I know people can find my Twitter, my Instagram, my LinkedIn, my website. I have a photo blog, a YouTube account. I have a TikTok account if anyone's into TikTok. I'd have to apply with a cover letter. I wanted to brand my email signature, and I wanted to have cards. And you can see how all of them together build this little visual feel for who I am. And there's two purposes to this. So the first one is, like I said, it kind of helps you figure out who you are and helps give a prospective employer an idea of who you are. And the second one is it's a mnemonic and it's a gimmick. It makes you memorable because people are going to go, oh, why don't we hire that girl? You know, the one with the fancy CV with the little lines on the side. Yeah, it's mnemonic. That sometimes might just be the thing that works. And through repetition, because we learn through repetition, you can make sure the chances of people remember you are higher. So for example, if I email, my CV is the one highlighted in pink, the cover letter is the one highlighted in blue, my email signature has the same logo, which is how I sent in my application details. Everything links to my website, which is branded like that. That's my YouTube channel, my business cards. All they have is my logo on one side and a QR code and my website on the other. And that's it. And again, it's a gimmick, but it might be that people go, oh yeah, that girl who gave us her card with the QR code, she sounded like she knows about disinformation or verification. Why don't we hire her? And those are the kind of things that can start to help. And that really makes a difference if you think about it from the beginning. Hold on a second. This is stuck now. Right. Tip number 2. And I did promise we were going to spend some more time on design. The second part's a little bit quicker, and then we'll open up to questions. Visual hierarchy. This is a little bit of design, but it's really important and it's going to make a huge difference to your design skills, not only, but also to how you can tell stories. This is applicable wherever you go. I use the same tips on visual hierarchy when I tweet, for example. So let me explain exactly what I mean by visual hierarchy. It's arranging items or elements and in a way that represents what is above or below or the same level as another. And it's using visual style to make sure that it's super clear what is above, what kind of texts are of the same kind, if the dates are all one color, or if where you worked are all another color. And the idea is to make it really easy to scan. So you can show hierarchy on a CV through different things: font size, font weight, font type, using italics, underlining some stuff, using lines or shapes, with color highlights, by using things in capitals versus in capitals and lowercase, with indentation, so moving things to one side of the screen or to the other, and with shapes around them. And combining all of these things together will help you structure that CV. The easiest example that I can make you guys think of is like menus. Think of a restaurant menu. There's those that are really overwhelming, like this one. I don't even know where to start reading. It's actually quite complicated. There is some sort of system to it, but my eyes keep jumping. Like I can't seem to focus my eyes on one bit and read. However, oh Christ, that didn't work. This beautiful thing is using, look at how the titles are all in caps. Everything else is in lowercase. It's using indentation to show me hierarchy. It's using space to show hierarchy as well. And you can use these same concepts to make your CV stand out, be easy to read, and also be easily scannable by algorithms. Don't forget the algorithms. They need our help. They're not human beings. They're not as smart as people. They need to have really well-intentioned information structure to be able to find your info quickly. So I'll show you mine. This is mine. And it kind of has this little leitmotif in the corners. It's the same as the font. Again, I just made these and I'll show you how in a second. It has my details at the top, my website at the bottom. And then the way I've organized it is like all the dates on the left-hand side, then a little space, then where I worked and what my title was in bold with a little like slash in the middle. And then in not bold, a 1 or a 2 line description of what I did at this place. And you can go, so if I'm either a computer or a person who has no time, I can very quickly identify what I'm trying to look at, right? So it's simple, it's clean, it's easy to scan, it's branded, it makes my work easy to find. It completely mirrors my LinkedIn, which is always, so when you're thinking of your CV, always think of it as half of your LinkedIn or like half a sandwich, right? The other half of the sandwich is your LinkedIn and they need to like mirror each other. That was a terrible, terrible metaphor. Ignore the sandwich thing. And also super important, this is just a cosmetic point, I never turn in a CV that is a Word document or that is called CV. It is a PDF with my name. There's been a lot of times when I've known of people who hire people who just because they get 50 CVs that are called CV, they drop those straight into the bin because they don't have the time to match the name to the CV. And because if you didn't have the attention to detail to put your name on your application files, they're kind of not interested in you anymore. And they kind of have a point. Everything that you turn in should have your name and what it is. Laura Garcia, CV. Laura Garcia, cover letter. The same goes for your uni assignments. As a former uni lecturer, the amount of times that everybody submitted final essay version 333, I didn't, like just by the file name, I didn't know whose it was. And sometimes it just takes longer. And maybe those 5 minutes it took me to figure out who had written it already puts me in a bad mood before I start to mark. This is exactly the same kind of situation. So always hand in everything as a PDF with your name and what it is on it. And it's important that it's a PDF for 2 reasons. One, PDFs are easier to print, so people in offices can print them. And number 2, a lot of people don't know how to make PDFs. So handing in a PDF is hella impressive. And again, it's those little gimmicks that sometimes will help you get ahead. And there's tons of places to look for inspiration. So this is, for example, the software that I kind of like evangelize about called Canva that helps you design stuff. All of these, for example, these are fake mock-up people, and you can choose any of these templates and then modify them to fit you. So let's say you like this one that says Jamie Chastain, but you don't like the colors and you want to make them brighter, or you need to change the font or stuff like that. There is no reason, you don't have to design anything from scratch. And it also doesn't have to be super complicated. Sometimes really simple and clear works, right? So if you're terrified and you're thinking, oh my God, but I'm not an artsy person, it's really not about being artsy. It's about thinking a little bit about what represents you. So for example, if you were to scan all of these options in front of you, I'm sure you've at least picked out one that you kind of like and one that you definitely don't like. And maybe it's just a process of elimination, playing with some different templates and seeing what kind of fits you, and then making sure that it's reflected across your entire Marvel universe of application materials. Tip number 3, your own URL makes you more memorable. Buying, for example, that's really weird way of saying it, www.lauragrb.com, which is my URL. That is about £12 a year. And now I have a website, so I've built myself a website, and that's where it links to. But you don't have to link to a website. You can even redirect it, for example, to your Twitter account, or to your LinkedIn profile, or to your blog, or if you publish for a uni newspaper, to your portfolio of work. It's not about where the URL leads. It's more about how you're making it really easy for people to find your work and to remember your name, because they're reading it on your CV, on your email, on your URL. Everything matches. See what I mean? So for example, here, my URL is at the bottom of my CV, but it's also on my Twitter account. So I'm increasing the chances of people stumbling across my work, whichever way they find me. And that is a good thing, right? And I understand that some people might not like either have the cash to spend on a URL or just have the like tech head to do it. The only thing I would say is it's not as hard as you think. DM me if you want any help. And it's also a lot cheaper. Like you can do it just by buying the URL as a cosmetic thing. You don't have to have a website attached to it. And it is one of those things that is going to make you stand out, right? So in terms of cost benefit, the cost is actually quite low for the benefit that you can get out of having your own URL that adds to this whole polished professional brand that you're trying to build. Tip number 4, keep your CV short. 2 sides of an A4 max. Why 2 sides of an A4 max? Because if I'm in an office and I print things like HR people do, most printers are programmed in offices to immediately print both-sided to save paper. So if I print your CV and it's 3 pages long, I get 1, 2, those are attached together because they're on the two different sides of the same page. But the third one, I might lose it. Am I going to remember to staple it? Am I going to accidentally just take one and leave the second one hanging? So that's one of the practical reasons. The other reason is that as journalists, our job is to synthesize. We have the incredible challenge of distilling the center of the basic or the core of a story into short snippets of time, whether it's on the radio, on television, in 300 words, on a tweet. And showing that you can do that to your own work history and experience is proof that you'd be able to do that for a story, right? So keep it short, keep it simple, 2 sides of an A4 max. Tip number 5, think beyond 2D. Technology is your best friend. People are going to assume, oh, that's not the right GIF. Well, anyway, people are going to assume that because you're young, you're tech savvy. Use that to your advantage, right? When you're competing for jobs, if you're competing against someone, for example, like our head of comms, Nicola, who's been freelancing for a while and has been published by national newspapers, you can't compete with her in terms of work experience. But maybe you have other skills that you can bring on board, which is to show all the shiny new tech that you know how to do. And take that also as a warning to the future. Learn new tech as it comes out so you can future-proof your own skills, and no one comes and takes your job when you're my age and someone age 20 comes and takes your job, right? So for example, I put QR codes on my business cards because it's a fancy thing. People remember that because it shows people I know how to use QR codes, right? If anybody didn't know this, your phone reads QR codes just without an app. All you need to do is open up the camera app, point it at the QR code that you have on your screen right now, and it should give you a little message at the top that says open lauragrb.com link. I have used this to make people remember me in person. I hand them my business card upside down so it has the QR code on the right side, and they go, ooh, what is this? I show them how to use their phones to read my QR code. And number 1, they've learned something new. Number 2, they go, ooh, this girl knows how to do something that I don't know. And number 3, now I'm going to be stuck in the back of their mind that that I'm the girl who can help them, or the woman rather, that can help them navigate new technologies and new storytelling formats. I should have run this by you, Ayo, but I was going to show another example of the ways that you can use technology for you. So this is a project that Ayo did when I was his lecturer at the University of Kent, and it's an Instagram storytelling kind of thing. He created an Instagram account where the Insta stories all kind of tell parts of the story of this one guy called Denzel, who's an aspiring actor. He was in Lion King in London. And then all the different posts tell different parts of the story, and you can read them in different orders or following the little arrows that he's done here. And I have seen people use this as a technique to apply for jobs. You can make yourself an Instagram CV where maybe each of the Insta stories talk about a different part of your work experience or the skills that you're into, where the posts highlight different parts of your work, right? And it becomes almost like an Instagram portfolio. I try to reach out to some of my former students who have helped to do Insta CVs and no one got back to me, which is why I didn't feel comfortable sharing that. But this is publicly available on Instagram. Go and check out Ayo's work. It's actually a really, really, really good project. But think about ways beyond paper, beyond 2D that you can use to kind of think about how you can be memorable and show to people that you have these skills, right? It's not just a gimmick. It's not just like, oh, I want to do something different. By doing something like this, you demonstrate that you have all the skills required to do something like this, and that's important. Oh, man. Does anybody have any questions before I move on to content things? Got my eye on the chat, and let me have a look over here on Slack to see everything's here. Nicola saying, I hear you giving tips on how to beat me to work. I didn't mean it like that, but also totally meant it like that. Emma Carson is asking, if you're 20, sorry, I shouldn't have read out your name. You're 20, but still rubbish with technology. Where do you go to learn stuff? Just try it. The people who, like me, look like they're super onto technology, it's because you're just seeing the end product. You have no idea how long I fight with things to make sure I understand them. If anyone tragically stumbles across my TikTok account, I think I've posted 4 videos. The last one took me about 3 hours to make. It was hard. It is not an easy platform for me. I think it's already moved beyond my natural abilities, but I stuck with it to understand it and to teach myself it. And yes, to whoever's saying YouTube is a lifesaver, because I've just Googled things. Thank God there are a ton of chat boards, and the nerds of the world have written down answers to all of your questions. So you can also just write into the internet, how do you complete the phrase with whatever it is that you're trying to learn? And that is probably a really good place to start. Let me have a look at other questions. Yeah, Danny, I also struggle with TikTok. But the thing is, right? TikTok's gonna die. Something's gonna come after it. If we miss a step, it's gonna be harder to catch up with the next thing. Don't let that happen to you. Don't let that happen to us. We can do it, you guys. It'll be fine. Ayo is asking from a question in the chat, with the thought of color printing, is it worth not using much color to make it easier to print? And is a photo of yourself worth having? Ooh, good question. We'll talk about photos in a second. When it comes to color printing, you're 100% correct, but I would say don't necessarily go for black and white. So think about what your CV is gonna look like in black and white, rather than not using color if you wanna use color. There's a really good app called Color Oracle. Like, what's the example I was thinking of? You know, like a never-ending story, there's an oracle that knows the future, Color Oracle. And then there's similar ones for PCs that let you see your screen in monochrome. And it's actually a really good thing to do for accessibility, because it also lets you see what your CV looks like for someone with color blindness or with different like eye disabilities, and different ways that you can make sure that your CV is accessible to anybody, regardless of how they see colors and therefore how they're printed, right? Color printing and black and white is not your only consideration. Some office printers print in funky colors. So you kind of want to try and mitigate all of those things by thinking a little bit in advance. But if you feel like color is something you want to do it. Just make sure you try different things and use these filters to see what would it look like in black and white if someone prints it in black and white, so that it doesn't matter either way how it works. Let me look at some other questions. In terms of branding, should we have a portfolio website or with a blog? To be honest, either. I think however you decide to have your work online, it needs to be consistent. So if you decide, you know what, I can't deal with life, it's just too much, all I'm going to do is have a ton of links on my LinkedIn, that's perfect. Just keep it updated. Or if you think, you know what, actually, I want to have my own blog because some of my uni assessments are really good, but they're not published, so I can just self-publish on a blog. That's also perfect. As long as it's updated, that's 100% fine. If Tumblr is your thing, if someone's still into Tumblr, use a Tumblr. If you want to keep an Instagram portfolio where the cover photo is like a QR code that takes you to one of your published articles, fine. However you want to do it, just pick one and stay consistently with it, so that then you can update it and also keep a track record of what you've done, right? And in 5 years' time, you'll look back and read your first articles and be like, wow, I've learned loads, because we all do. Let me read another one of Ayo's questions. You've also already read that one. Is it a good idea to have a section of your CV that bullet points key skills and the boring stuff like that you can drive? 100%. driving is hugely important, especially for, let me try again, especially for journalism, because particularly now, imagine now, so I can drive, I have a car, I can get to a story without getting on public transport like that. There's reduced train services, there's reduced bus services because of coronavirus, and there's obviously the safety concern on getting on public transport. That sometimes is the difference of who gets a job, particularly for freelancers. Being mobile and being able to move places and being able to say, I can be there in 2 hours versus 4 hours on a train is a competitive edge. And it's also a life skill. Like, you never know when you're in a story, and that might be the thing that gets you out of a bind. I remember once, I used to be an assistant producer at Channel 5, and my cameraman and I, we went over, we did an interview, and then we were super late, stuck in traffic. So what the cameraman suggested was, why don't you keep driving us back? The traffic's really slow anyway. I'll jump in the back of the van, because they have like a little edit suite, and edit while you drive us back to base. And that gave us the edge. It meant that we got back to the office with 20 minutes to spare. The package was already cut in the back. Otherwise, we would have gotten there, sit down to edit, and then maybe not making it onto the air, right? So definitely kind of driving, any languages you speak, any software that you manage. If you know sign language, that can also be really useful as well. Anything that you think can have a practical application, which is basically everything, right? Because journalism is about people, and all of those skills come into play. Let me have a look at other questions over here. Nicola saying, an editor at The Guardian said to me once, if you can drive, make it clear to the news desk, because the other day, none of the reporters on duty could drive, and they needed to send someone somewhere hard to reach, in case you needed another anecdote to back that up. So there you go. You've got that one as well. Also, if you don't know how to drive, 100% like invest in that. Invest that in yourself. It's part of your professional development, particularly for journalism. It's an important skill to have. Hold on a second. Let me have a look at some other questions on the chat. TikTok. Someone's asking, I was wondering, can I use Linktree on my CV until I create my own website, or is it better to use something more direct, like a link to my Medium? It's kind of, I think it's kind of up to you. It depends across how many different formats you've worked. So for example, my career has been a little bit ping-pongy, where I started out in photography and then did a bit of radio and then did a bit of television and then did some online-y stuff. So I kind of needed somewhere to put them all, because they were all scattered across different places and they were all different mediums. So I needed to have a place to embed my videos or embed my like interactives that I'd done, which is why I decided to go for a website. But it doesn't really matter as long as they're all in one place. And the important thing about having a portfolio of any kind, whether it's a website or a Linktree or your LinkedIn, is because if someone asks you for a sample of your work, you send them a link that is on your portfolio, and then they might accidentally start poking around and reading more of your work, right? Again, you're trying to increase the chances of people coming into contact with all the different things that you know how to do and with examples of your work. And that's why that's important. You don't send them out to the blog that you wrote for Metro, because then they're on Metro's website, right? You send them out to the link for the Metro piece that you wrote on your blog, so that then they can poke around and see the other things that you've written. That's kind of why it's important also to keep them all in one place. And that might be your LinkedIn. It might be a Linktree, which I've recently discovered thanks to Nicola, and it's magical. But yeah, that's kind of the point, to keep everything together and also to increase the chances of people seeing more of your work. Let me have another question. For your personal website portfolio, would you recommend putting links to the published work or pasting your best articles on the actual website, or a mixture of both? I think it's a mixture of both. So it doesn't always have to be stuff that's been published, particularly at the beginning of your career. So if stuff that is that your uni assignments that you think is really good, self-publish on a blog. Why not? Sounds great. If it's stuff that might not be your proudest work, that you're proudest of, but it's a big name, that might be worth including, because it's a big name that you got published in, right? We all have different, we're all proud of different things that we've done for different reasons. So for example, I still keep a lot of my wedding photography on my website, even though I'm not a wedding photographer anymore, but because I like telling that story about me. I like telling the story that I used to do weddings and it taught me about people, and that's why I can manage a group of 30 to pose for a family portrait. And I like that part of how it fits into my career. But if I ever decide it doesn't, then I just chuck it out and don't use it on my website anymore. It's, again, kind of part of, think about the story that you're trying to tell about yourself, and then decide what goes in and what doesn't, and in what format, right? Is it good? I think we've already kind of answered that question. I'm going to keep going with the last 5 tips, and then I'll come back to some more questions. Keep bringing them into either the chat, or if anyone's watching on Facebook, my team's also thankfully pasting them here on Slack, so I make sure that I don't miss anybody's questions. Right, so tip number 6, and remember, these are all about content, right? So we did the first 5 about design, the visual part of how you tell your story. This is about the content, what's in the meat of your CV. So tip number 6 is write like a journalist. Your CV, your cover letter is your writing audition. If I'm looking for a junior television producer to help me write TV scripts, and what you hand me is a CV that is full of text and it's all one paragraph with no stops, that doesn't show me that you can write for television. The way journalists write is short, active sentences, clear, right? Now, this might change a little bit. For example, if you're applying for a gorgeous job as a writer at The Atlantic, right? Where literary writing is part of the gig, and you have to have beautifully crafted phrases with subclauses and all the adjectives in the world, and no thesaurus can match your knowledge of vocab, right? So write like that. If you're applying for a job at BuzzFeed, write like you're applying to get a job at BuzzFeed. You're applying to write for the Telegraph, write like people at the Telegraph do, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go and kind of like do something that doesn't fit with your voice. Find your own voice that matches that style, that emulates that style, because that's what you would have to do anyway if you actually get the job, right? And the same goes with your email, if you're emailing in, or any other way that you have to type in application stuff. So you know how sometimes jobs have little boxes of scenarios where you have to type in an answer to a question. So think about it the same way as well. You are giving them proof. It's your writing audition of how you can do this job for them, right? And if you can do it for yourself to tell your own story, you can 100% do it for them. Tip number 7, spelling mistakes suck because they show a lack of attention to detail. And our profession, we work with facts, right? And those facts require attention to detail. Yes, journalists make mistakes, and we try our hardest to make as little mistakes, as less mistakes as we can. But that attention to detail is important. And just like I used to get really pissy when my students would hand in an assignment that was riddled with spelling mistakes, the same thing will happen with your application if your CV or your cover letter has got spelling mistakes and it goes straight into the bin. Now, if you're like me and you're kind of like a subject talking person rather than a writing person, I am always riddled with spelling mistakes and little grammar bits because it's not my thing. And also English is my second language. So whenever I'm applying for a job, I make sure someone else reads my application with fresh eyes and to pick out the bits that I can't see anymore just because I've been staring at it for so long. Grammar and spelling matter, especially for our profession, especially if you're applying for a job in print journalism or online. So keep that in mind. It's not just, oh my God, who cares? No, people care. This is our job. It's what we do. Tip number 8, tailor your CV to the job. Highlight the relevant bits, change it around. If you're going for a super brainy researcher job for The Economist podcasts, I forget what their daily podcast is called, The Intelligence. If you guys heard it, it's really good. Where research skills matter, maybe you want to put your uni work at the top. And if you did a dissertation, give the title or a link to where people can go and see it. Or if you wrote a fancy essay, and that is an important part of how you can represent that you have the skills they're looking for. Amazing. If you're going for a broadcasting job where presenting and interpersonal skills are important, and you did some acting, for example, at university, maybe you want to make sure that's super clear on your CV to know so that people know that you have those skills that are transferable, right? I used to be a theater kid in high school, and that's a lot of where I learned how to fill time. So I can fill time forever. That's a lot of how I learned how to not panic in front of a crowd, or how to not get shy from trying to do a piece of camera in front of a lot of people. And those transferable skills really, really, really matter, right? Or for example, if you're going for a sports journalism job and you used to coach like a little league for little kids on weekends, that's important. It gives you an insight into the sport and the industry that you're trying to cover. So tailor it to the job, highlight the relevant bits. And sometimes that might require a lot of moving around, and sometimes it might require less moving around than you think. Tip number 9. Links are your best friend. Make your work super easy to find. If you're doing your CV either on Canva or any other design program that you like, you can make the text links. So if you're telling me, for example, that you did an internship at Wired, list 2 of your coolest articles and make them links so I can click directly on the file. It's also an impressive thing. A lot of people don't know how to make links in PDFs, and that'll be like, ooh, this young person can do the linkies. And again, if all these links link back to your portfolio where the rest of your work is stored, then it means they'll accidentally stumble across other things that you've done. And that is an important part of it. You're playing a stats game. You're trying to put as many reasons why they'll stumble across you and your amazing work. And that's it. And it doesn't have to be published work by official outlets or media outlets, right? This can be your blog. This can be your uni assignments. It can be the stuff that you write for your paper or community radio that you've worked for, anything like that. Tip number 10, gaps are suspicious. Gaps are more suspicious than non-journalism related jobs. Journalism is a very competitive industry. It requires a little bit of hunger. You kind of have to want it, and you have to have that same spirit when you're chasing down a story. Whether you're on a daily newspaper or a long-term investigative reporter, there's something about that fire inside that we can't teach you, right? That just kind of comes with you, that smell for a story, that wanting to know, that wanting to keep asking questions, and that little amazing adrenaline thrill that you get when you listen to the perfect quote and you're like, yes, you just said the perfect thing to my camera. And you can show that you have that by proving it with your work history. And that it doesn't matter whether the first 5 jobs that you've got listed aren't necessarily directed to journalism, but you had that hustling fire inside you to keep getting jobs and to find your way and to try new things. And every job will teach you something different that's transferable. Even stacking shelves at Asda teaches you how to work with people, how to deal with tough customers, how to be organized, how to have discipline. So gaps in your CV are way more suspicious than non-journal related work, right? And it's also about kind of like your own professional development. Your first job is going to be a lot more about just getting a first job and not being fired. I think we underestimate the value of not being fired. So if you've been babysitting for the last 5 years, that is long-term employment. Put that on your CV, right? You have learned things doing that. Someone has decided that your work is worth paying for the last 5 years. That is impressive. There is value in that, and you will have learned a ton of stuff from it. So don't leave gaps on or try as much as you can. I know sometimes like circumstances are harder, but try as much as you can to not have gaps on your CV. And if there's a legitimate reasons, we all have life things that happen to us, and that's fine, and you can explain that, right? But it's more about seeing that trend. Do I see that hustle? Do I see that fire? Do I see that constant like trying to find ways of doing this thing that we love? Because journalism is a hard, weird industry of long hours, and you kind of, it's one of those things that we do more for the passion and the love of it, right? So make sure that also is represented in your CV. And a bonus one, like I said before you submit, get a second pair of eyes, someone who can pick out spelling mistakes, grammar bits, maybe something that looks weird after looking at a piece of workloads. Just like when you're crafting an article, there's always that's why subs are perfect. Subs look at our work without any prior knowledge of it and can, in complete coldness, fix the things that need fixing. Get someone to look at your CV. This can be your parents or your friends or your partner, or whoever, just someone to give it a second pair of eyes. Now, typical questions that I get asked that I think are just a matter of style of whether you include or not include these things. Profile photos in CVs. If you feel weird about them, if you don't have any photos of you that you like, if you only have photos of you holding a drink, don't do it. If you like photos of you and if you like the idea of a profile photo, 100% go for it. Just make sure it's a good looking headshot. It doesn't have to be professional, but find yourself a whitish wall with a day when it's nice light. Today's getting really dark for no good reason. And use that, right? Too often do I see photos where you can totally see that someone was holding like a drink here and it's been cropped out. That is hella awkward. Get yourself a nice photo. It's been nice weather outside lately. Just get yourself a nice profile photo if you want to use one. Once coronavirus is not here anymore, one of the things that I would really like to do is to offer free headshots to up and coming journalists, but that is a TBC when everything gets back to normal. So profile photos, 100%, if you feel like it kind of fits with you and you like the idea, don't do them if it feels weird for you. Personal statements, kind of the same thing. Don't do them if they feel weird. I've never been able to write a concise, like short 3-sentence paragraph about myself. I just try and it feels so unnatural, so I just don't do it, right? Sometimes job applications will ask you for a short bio of yourself and then you have no choice. But when it comes to your CV, you can choose. If it feels weird for you, don't do it. If you do kind of want to do it, make sure they're short. This is your writing audition. You're giving me the headline and the stand first, right? Of who you are and what you do. Don't repeat just stuff that's in your CV. Make that personal statement. Tell me something about you and who you are and what you like by how it's written and by the information that it includes. But by all means, if it feels weird, just don't include them. Your address on job applications. This is one that I've just learned from watching friends and people go through the process. I would never put my address on a CV unless it's relevant to the job. I do know people who would be like, oh no, they live in X. Oh no, they live in Y. And if you're applying for a job, it implies that either you're willing to move or you're willing to commute. And that is your problem, not theirs, right? So unless your address is relevant to the job, so if you're applying, for example, for a local paper in Essex and you live in Essex, that's relevant because it means you know the community and you'll understand the issues that face it and you'll know the patch and you'll know how to move around. But if it has nothing to do with the job itself, I wouldn't put your address on it, just to make sure that people don't make decisions that are stupid based on where you live or where they think you come from or anything like that. Right, I've got two surprise guests who are going to give you guys advice on what employers are looking for, and then we'll open it back to questions, and I'd love to hear what's on your mind. And I'll stop sharing my screen, and if anyone wants to ask questions with their face, you can ask questions with your face, or we can read them off the chat.
Hello, my name's Luke Jacobs. I'm the editor of Kent Live. We're a regional news website down here in the beautiful Garden of England, and we're also part of the publisher that publishes the Daily Mirror and the Daily Star and the Express too. So I've been honoured to have been asked by PressPad to give you what I'm looking for in a CV or any application from somebody wanting to join my team or from anybody wanting to join our company. So I would probably bring it down to 3 main things that I would look for, particularly when it comes to a CV. The first thing would be simplicity. Keep it to 1 page. It doesn't have to have your face on it. It doesn't have to have every single last detail about yourself. As long as you can distill it on that 1 A4 sheet of paper, you're really in for an advantage there. The second thing I would say is relevance. Make that, whatever you're going for, whatever job you're going for, even if, and particularly if that's journalism, make it relevant to the role you're going for. So for instance, if it's in news, make it something that would include your relevant experience or your aspirations or anything you've done in your own spare time relating to news. And the same goes for sport or features or culture writing. The third thing, of course, and this might sound obvious, but it is really important, is experience. So think of something you may well have written on your Facebook page, a video you may have filmed, some experience you've got in a newsroom, your own website, your own blog.
Hi everyone, I'm Abby Scott. I'm the Deputy Managing Editor at the Financial Times. I see a lot of CVs and applications from students for internships and for our trainee journalism positions at the FT. So here are some of our top tips. Make sure you include all of your work experience. Nothing is irrelevant. Please don't take off the part-time job in Topshop whilst you were studying. Do include things like volunteering or if you help out kids at the Sundays church. All of these things tell prospective employers about your ability to work with others and to make connections. It's really important. There is nothing worse than a CV without any work experience on it and just qualifications. Make sure you include links to freelance articles or any work on student newspapers. It really helps to show that you've got an appetite for journalism as a student. I can appreciate that it can be really hard to get published when you're studying. So if you can't do those things, think about publishing your own blog or having your own YouTube channel.
So Luke Jacobs from Kent Live and Abby Scott from the FT, giving us two completely opposite views, right? Luke wants short, one side of an A4. He's even giving you less space than I was saying. Don't include experience that isn't relevant to journalism. Abby's saying, no, put everything on there because I want to read everything about you and what experience you've got in different places, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't have to do with journalism. So what do you do, right? And this is where the balance is important, and this is going to be a decision depending on you, your experience, and the job that you're applying for. And it's kind of hard because I wish I could give you a recipe of exactly what to do every single time, but you're going to have to take it on a case-by-case basis. And this is also going to change as you progress in your career and as you get more things that you can put on the work experience part of your CV. So for example, if the job you're applying for, like I was saying before, it will include, for example, if you went for a job writing for BBC Bite Size, right? They're the part of the BBC that does stuff for schools, and you did a bit of part-time tutoring. That is kind of relevant because you had to be a teacher while you were tutoring to develop interpersonal skills on how to speak to people younger than you. And that's kind of what you're going to be doing as a journalist at BBC Bite Size. So that's kind of relevant. The more that you have actual work experience, the less space physically that you're going to have to include other stuff, right? So you're going to have to start to make those decisions. I used to put on my CV a bunch of the volunteering work that I did when I was in high school at the beginning of my career, because I didn't have a ton of actual work experience to put in there, but I kind of felt that my volunteering showed some of my interests and my willingness to put myself out there to try different things. But the more I started to have like real jobs, the more I started to keep the volunteering out, unless it was relevant, right? If there's a job that you've had for a really long time, like I said, don't underestimate the value of not getting fired. So if you've had a part-time, I was going to say fart, the part-time job. If you've had a part-time job during your whole time at uni, put that on there. That is really impressive. Keeping a job for 3 years or 4, however long your degree's been, is important, and it speaks miles to your ability to work in a group and to hold a job and to not get fired and to work in a team, right? So think about that as well. And it's also what you feel comfortable with. If there's ever a situation where you have to leave a job because there was uncomfortable work with your colleagues or something happened and you don't want people to go back for a reference, or there's things that you don't want to, that you'd rather not have, each person's experience is completely different, and you're going to have to judge it on a case-by-case level. But the thing that both Abby and Luke mentioned was, show us what you're about, whether it's in one side of an A4 or include every single work experience you've ever done to show me about the kind of stuff that you're into. It's about showing on paper who you are and the kind of things that you are not only interested in, but have actually done, right? And self-publish if you haven't been published yet. Your uni work, your passion to write about music is important. Your live coverage on Twitter of sports events, if you want to be a sports reporter, is important practice. Anything just to show that you can actually do the job, because journalism is like riding a bike. Until you actually start doing it, you won't get better at it. And proving to a prospective employer that you've actually started the practice, that you've done it, that you understand that it takes practice to get better, is really, 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 really important. And I'm going to give you one last piece of advice on behalf of from Abby Scott, who graciously sent me 2 clips to play for you guys, and then we'll open it back up to questions. So here's Abby Scott again, managing editor of the...
Think carefully about your CV letter or email that you send with an application. Don't send the same letter to every news organisation when you're applying. It's obvious to us and it shows a lack of effort. Tailor your letter to the organisation and their journalism. Reference the work they've done recently. If you're emailing an individual journalist, do your research and reference their recent work and what you enjoyed. You can always email journalists individually for advice. If you're polite, you're smart, and you explain why you're asking, you may be lucky. But the worst that will happen is you just don't get a response from them. If you do happen to start a conversation with a journalist, trust them if they say, keep in touch and let me know how you get on. I say this often to students and people that apply for jobs, and rarely does anyone actually keep in contact with me. It's always a surprise. So be inventive, get creative, and take a chance. Good luck. Now you know who I am. I look forward to hearing from you.
Got a couple of questions from Slack, and then I'll go through the chat and answer anything and everything you want to ask. So first one says, if you have a gap on your CV, would you mention it on a cover letter to explain the gap? It depends where the gap is and how big it is. So if it's a humongous gap that you kind of feel needs an explanation, you might have to, but remember, you don't have to apologize for anything. If there is a reason why there's a gap on your CV, if you write about it like you're apologizing for it, it's kind of like vox pops. You're going to get back the energy that you put into them. If you walk up to a random stranger to try to vox pop them and you go, oh, you know what, I'm really sorry, do you have 5 minutes? I just need to ask you some questions. I'm really sorry to trouble you. They're going to walk off, right? They're going to walk past you, go to Primark, and they'll listen to whatever you have to say. But if you just walk up to them confidently and you're like, hey, my name's Laura, I'm a journalist, I'm doing some really quick questions about the economy and coronavirus, more likely than not, people will stay and talk to you, if only to say, no, thank you, I'm in a rush. It's exactly the same way. If don't write in an apologetic way, if you have a legit reason, you have a legit reason, and build that as part of your strengths. I'm sure you must have learned something from it. It must have given you a different experience. It gives you something to write about. It makes you a better person, or you learned something, or it made you stronger, anything like that, right? Turn it into a plus rather than into a minus. And it kind of also depends where that gap is, right? If it's a 2-month gap, I wouldn't worry so much about it, because that's sometimes how it takes to transfer from one job to the next. If it's a humongous one, again, own it, make it part of your story. What are your thoughts on including the reference, or at least part of it, on the CV, like your professional references? So I always include references at the bottom of my CV, but I only include the name and the title of the person. I never put their contact details for 2 reasons. Number one, I always want to be able to give people a heads up if they're going to get contacted. I mean, obviously pre-agree with someone if you're going to ask them to be, if you're going to put them as your reference on your CV, so that they never get an email out of the blue. I know, for example, my former students have always said, like, a couple of them have asked, hey, can I put you on future job applications? And I'm like, yeah, in theory, just give me a heads up if there's a new one coming my way, so I know what the hell I'm talking about. But I do put the names and the titles as the references available by request to show the types of people that are willing to vouch for me. And I try to make sure that those people are from different varied backgrounds. So for example, if you're just coming out of uni, don't have 2 lecturers. Those are practically the same people. Think of them as case studies, right? Have a lecturer and your manager at Topshop, or just have a lecturer, or have a lecturer of different departments. So if you're doing one of those combined degrees, have a lit lecturer and a politics lecturer, or a journalism lecturer, right? And then that's how you use their social clout to back you up and what you're up to. There's also a way on LinkedIn when you can ask people for references. That's a really good way as well to have kind of live references available for people to find. For some reason, HR people love LinkedIn. I don't get it. I think it's an ugly social network. I've never been able to get into it. I'm really sorry if anyone's into LinkedIn. Totally do your thing, enjoy it, like it. But I do understand the value of keeping it updated. I have been offered jobs through LinkedIn, people constantly getting in touch through there. HR people use it to research who we are before they pass us on to the editor who's actually going to look at your job. So maybe think about that as well, that some of your references could be on LinkedIn. And they don't have to be, you don't have to have Ben DePere of Channel 4 giving you a reference. It can be the person who's your editor at your uni paper, right? They speak to the quality of your work now. Remember that it's more important people who know you well, rather than not putting anything down because you're waiting for, I'm blanking now on name, Amal Rajan to give you a reference, right? One day he will, you guys will be fine, and he'll be glad to know you all. But until that day comes, make sure your references are people who know you, who could speak to your abilities right now. Another question, bullet points versus snappy paragraph. I'm guessing it's when we're talking about the personal statement. Again, whatever feels right for you. I've never been able to write either about myself, so I just don't put them. It just feels weird for me. As long as that paragraph is snappy, fine. If the bullet points seem cuter, fine. It might be a design question of where it fits in your CV, also fine, right? It'll kind of depend, and you might want to change it from place to place. So, for example, if you're applying, I'm going to keep banging on about BuzzFeed because it's an easy example. But if you wanted to apply for BuzzFeed and you wanted to do a listicle of 10 reasons why you want to hire Laura as your CV, why not, right? Actually, to that point, let me show you guys something. I'm gonna log into, what is it? Flourish Studio. So this is how, well, no, I can't say for certain this is how I got my job at First Draft, but this is one of the things I used to apply for my job at First Draft. And I decided that if they were trying to find a person who had journalism experience and teaching experience, who could innovate and who could find new ways of both telling stories but also teaching, I had to kind of prove that with my application docs. So I made an interactive version of my CV. And if my internet is going to cooperate, I will show you guys. Don't know why I didn't think of putting this in, of showing you this before. If anyone knows how to use Flourish, Flourish is a free data visualization software that you can use to do cool data stuff. So what I did is, it's an interactive version of my CV. So it has the data behind it. Like I categorized, just because my kind of job life has been really itty bitty in different parts. So I wanted to show that I had broadcast journalist experience, teaching experience, that I'd run some projects and I did some photography. And each of these, the size of the block represents how long I've worked in that place, and you hover over it and it tells you the length of time. And I made that a clickable link on my application materials in my CV and my cover letter. And I also sent it through as a link in my email when I applied, and I put it, I can't remember if I put it in a QR code or somewhere, but I remember I also showed it to them in person when I eventually got to the interview, and said, this is what I like. I like puzzles, I like storytelling, I like innovating, I like breaking down complex concepts into really easy digestible chunks, and the proof is in the pudding. I just did it with my CV and I can do that for you. So think about, I can't remember where's this started. Bullet points versus snappy paragraphs. Yeah. And cool interactive CVs. Try that. Other question, which is better, the neutral white wall headshot or the action shot taken while interviewing reporting? Do you mean the the monkey shot? What is it? Like every journalist portrait is kind of like that versus the action shot? Either, whatever feels right for you. If you have a shot of you that you really like, of you doing your job, use that maybe as a header, or it can be a parallax image in your website. Or maybe it's not on your CV, but it's on your LinkedIn, because remember, LinkedIn has like a cover, kind of like Twitter. So it kind of depends. The problem with action shots is that they're harder to make small for CVs, where normally you have less space. But again, it's kind of up to you. And you also don't have to dress up. Like you don't have to, if you're a man, like put on a suit, or a girl, you don't have to put on a blazer, like try and look older, because you're not older. And that's the cool thing about you. You are the new fresh thing walking into the newsroom. Professional does not mean old. Professional does not mean serious and boring. You can be professional and young and fresh and all of those things that you have going for you. Another question. Once you've made that connection, what kind of thing is good to worth following up with? If you do something good, if they do something good. Oh, I see what you mean. So once you've managed to talk to a journalist, if I'm honest, anything, if you do something cool and you'd love to get your critique, just say that. Be like, hey, I just, thank you so much for meeting me at that event last month. I just wrote this piece for uni that I'm really proud of, but I would love to hear your thoughts from your experience, anything that I could do to make it better. Back before coronavirus times, inviting people out for coffee is a great thing to do, but now you can invite them for a metaphorical coffee over Zoom. If anything, one of the silver linings of all of us being stuck at home is that they don't have an excuse. Like, where are they going to go? Are they super busy being out? Like, no, everyone's stuck at home. Surely they can give you 20 minutes over Zoom or over a phone call. And like Abby said, you have nothing to lose. If they say, you know what, actually, I'm really busy and I'm going through some stuff, do you mind not? Then you know, and you back off, right? So that's always a good way to get around. Or if you see work that they've done that you really like, it kind of shows that you are paying attention to what they're doing. And we all like talking about our work. It's great. Who doesn't? Especially if you've like sweated over working on a story. And then you're going to ask me to talk about it. Of course I'll talk about it. I'll tell you about all the work I had to do to get that piece made. So that's another way that you can do it. Which would be better, your own website or a Muckrack profile? So either, my only question is, the problem is with Muckrack is that you have to be published somewhere. Like it doesn't aggregate blogs and stuff, does it? Or like mediums and things. So if you're consistently getting published in like professional media outlets, Muckrack sounds fine. But again, if you're like me and you've kind of been published in different bits and like little indie places and stuff that is different formats, your own website might be a better way to make sure that you can keep all your work in one place. The last thing you want to do is give people options or ways out to not see your work. So if you're saying, you can see my print work here, but my TV work here, but my other work here, you're going to lose them in that space, right? So you need it all to be in one place. And it honestly depends on the kind of work that you do. If you are a hardcore radio person, maybe it's a SoundCloud, right? With all of your best links and your clips. If you're a hardcore TV person, maybe it's a Vimeo or a YouTube account. It kind of depends what kind of work you're interested in doing and what's the best way of collating it all. Another question, is it above board to republish the text onto your website, or is it breaching copyright as in stuff you publish? That is a really good question. So I wouldn't reproduce the whole text. What I would use is the headline, the intro para, and then link to where your stuff's been published. Because otherwise you can, like, it depends on the outlet, but you can get into copyright problems. And in the end, it doesn't matter if they have to click on something else to see your work, because you've already made them land on your website or your blog or your portfolio first. So take the headline, take the stand first, or the little description bit at the beginning, and then link out, and that's fine. That's how I would do it. Is it necessary to have your own website blog with an official paid domain address? Will employers look down on you if you link to a free.wordpress.com site? I don't think they will. It's also not that expensive to have a URL that's linked to a basic WordPress site. So there are ways of just having a website without having to buy hosting. And you can do that through the basic packages on Wix, on WordPress, on, what's the one that they advertise on the podcasts? Squarespace. On Squarespace. Does anyone listen to Serial? I went for MailChimp in my head. Yeah. Not that one, because that's a newsletter thing. But yeah, all of those like easy website builders will have the most basic package where all you do is buy your URL without hosting space. The hosting gives you more ways to personalize your website, or so you can store bigger files, but you honestly don't need that at the beginning. All you need is a place that looks and feels like you, and that has all your work in one place. And again, that can be your LinkedIn. It can be a Medium page. It can be a Tumblr. It can be an Instagram account, right? Just as long as it's all collected. Having read so many CVs, are there any trends which we should avoid? I hate pictures with people holding drinks in them. I honestly do. That is one of my pet peeves. I'm just like, just don't. If that's the only shot that you have of you, not even that, if you couldn't make the effort to find a wall that's white, or go outside to a garden and take a picture of yourself to put on your CV because you really wanted one, I don't think you're gonna have that hunger to go and look out for a story. Because remember that what we do as journalists is production storytelling, right? Whether it's through our words or through images or through sound. And it matters the background behind your interviews. It matters that you record an interview in a quiet place. It matters that you write beautifully if you're in print. All of those things matter. And that same attention to detail that you see when people have spelling mistakes, you see it when people pick pictures that really should never have been on a CV. Or when I can 100% tell it's you on holiday in Ibiza or somewhere like that. It's just like, don't do it. But that's just my one pet peeve. And the other one that I think is the biggest trend, and I used to do it as well at the beginning of my career, is that we all try and sound older by how we write, because we're trying to seem super professional. But for the people reading on the other side, it's 100% transparent. It's kind of like when kids put their dad's shoes on and like an oversized t-shirt and pretending they're dad. That's what it reads like. I guarantee you it is transparent. So just don't do it. That's not why someone's going to want to hire you. They're going to want to hire you because you can write like a journalist, or write like a journalist. Don't leave the thesaurus on the side. You're not writing an essay. You don't need to pretend that you're 45 and I don't know, I'm going for terrible stereotypes here. Just write like a journalist. More questions that I might have missed. Let me have a look at the chat. Someone's mentioning Grammarly. It is a good one to catch spelling and grammar mistakes as you're writing. Gaps in your CV, we've already kind of gone through that. Bullet points. Once you've made the connection, that's another one. URLs. Oh, someone's already done the Googling for us. So apparently, well, no, I'm not going to say it because it's like an advertisement for them. It's in the chat. Danny's already done some research about how much all of these websites cost. Any more questions, you guys? Or if anyone wants to ask them with like their voice, raise your hand and Ayo can help me unmute anybody. It doesn't necessarily just have to be about CVs. It can be about applying for jobs, or if anyone's like super brave and wants to send their CV through the chat, we can analyze it live on television. Right, you guys, it's getting close to time, and I'm also really aware that my team is kind of like standing on as well, helping to answer questions and stuff. There's a question, Ayo says, I think you've done all the questions, which is good. And then another question, how are you doing so many projects, jobs at the same time? I spin many plates, and so far I haven't dropped one yet. I don't know, I kind of like projects. I'm a projects person. And I've always really liked finding different things to do and keeping track of things at the same time. I get bored really easily. So if I'm doing one single thing, I tried doing office jobs and didn't like it, which is why I decided to become a photographer and a journalist. And it's also about being really organized. So I love me a spreadsheet. I love me a task list. I love automation to remind me of stuff. So if anyone's heard of if this, then that, I use that to help me remind of stuff or like automate part of my process. I'm teaching myself Python to automate some of the more boring admin work that I do. And that kind of helps keep me on track. But if you decide to be a freelancer, for example, like Nicola, you also have to have a ton of organization because your work is self-driven, right? And I'm sure we can persuade her to do a masterclass on how to find that same rhythm, your own work rhythm, and to find your own balance, and how to make sure that you do all the things that you have to do and that you keep in track of them. There's another really good app that I've discovered. It's called Boomerang. You know, like the things that you throw and they come back at you. It's a Gmail plugin. And what Boomerang does is that it reminds you to chase up a conversation. So for example, if I'm sending out an email to someone I want to interview, I can set a Boomerang reminder so it comes up to the top of my inbox in 2 weeks. So when I've forgotten about it, it reminds me to then get back to that person and go like, hey, do you still want to talk to me? We said we were going to talk before. You can do that for yourself, for example, when you're applying for a job, and set a Boomerang reminder for yourself a month after you've applied to say, hey, just wanted to see if you had any feedback or anything else that you need from my end, blah, blah, blah. Chances are, remember that HR processes also move a lot slower than real life. You might apply for a job in February and not hear back till April, and that is kind of normal sometimes. So don't despair, right? We're so used to the instant gratification of things that happen on our phone and like likes and everything. HR moves at a different pace. It's the kind of work culture where you turn off your emails at 5 and you don't look at them till 9 in the morning, which is something that we don't understand as journalists, right? Because we're on the job all the time. Twitter doesn't stop, the news don't stop, but hiring processes do, and you kind of have to have that patience. But maybe setting reminders and automations to help you chase up those conversations is a good way to do it. Last questions, you guys. No, we're good to go. I'm gonna ask you to do me a favor, so don't log off just yet. Hold on a second. Where did I leave my slides? So because we're doing all this kind of stuff for free for you guys, as we want to keep doing them, we're applying for funding to keep doing these things for free, which means that we need your help to show impact, to show that the work that we're doing is helpful for people, to show that you guys are learning stuff or that you're liking things, and also because we genuinely want to hear your feedback and see if there's anything that we can do any better. So I'm going to use my QR code trick and ask you guys to point your phone, please, at the screen right now with your camera mode open, and it's going to take you to a survey. It'll take you like 5 minutes to fill out. It's going to ask a bunch of demographic details, which we will use in an anonymous way, just to kind of paint a picture of the kind of people that are being helped by PressPad Remote, and also to help us learn how we can help you guys better and how we can reach different audiences and all that kind of nice, lovely jazz. So please, 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 if you can spare 5 minutes, fill out the survey. You'll also get it in like a little wrap-up email from Eventbrite after the event, where I'll send you guys some useful links and things to look at and listen, read, that you can use as a follow-up to this session. And if I can ask for one more favor, if you can take to your social media network of preference and make some noise about the session that you've just been in today. Again, help us prove to people that it's important that we keep doing this work, that there are people who want it, that who are learning stuff from it. Tell us what we can do better, whether it's a tweet or something on Instagram. Make sure you tag PressPad and use our hashtag PressPadRemote. And if you're hungry for more and need things to do, because we're all stuck inside, we've got 4 really cool events coming up in the next 2 weeks. On Wednesday, we have an Instagram lunchtime Q&A with Tamina Begum. She's an amazing journalist and one of our ambassadors. That's on Wednesday the 10th. And then on Thursday the 11th, this amazing lady called Portia is going to do a session on how she has used business journalism as like a day job almost to fund her wildest journalism adventures. And she's going to talk us through how her journey can help inform maybe some of your future decisions of what to do. Then the week after, we have an Instagram Q&A with Nadine White. If you haven't come across Nadine, she works for Huffington Post and recently asked a really important question during Prime Minister's Questions. She's an amazing young journalist and lovely person as well. So we'll do a Twitter and Instagram Q&A. And to add some men to this mix, the Thursday of that week, the BBC's Richard Murrell, who's an amazing journalist, documentary filmmaker, is going to talk to us about how to make TV magic. So for those of us who are into broadcast, that is 100% a session not to miss. So please, please, please help us make some noise on PressPad, on Twitter. Use the hashtag, tag us. I really want to thank the team. So Ayu, Amber, and Nicola, who have all been on Slack, helping out, reading messages, making sure I didn't miss any of your questions. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Keep in touch with PressPad. Let us know how we can help. You can find me on Twitter at LauraGRB. My DMs are open. And like Abby said, get in touch. We mean it. Stay safe, you guys. Go wash your hands. Bye.